Don't you want to try the coffee I made especially for you, honey? My husband James asked, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. We were seated at my sister-in-law Nina's elegant dining table in her Nashville home, gathered for our usual monthly family brunch. In front of me sat a steaming cup of coffee with a faint, metallic odor that turned my stomach. I'm Christina. I'm 29 years old, and I never thought I'd reach a point in my marriage where I'd question if my own husband was trying to poison me. But after 3 years of accidental food poisoning incidents, all brushed off with excuses and innocent smiles, always after meals prepared or served by Nina, I had learned to be cautious. Especially around her. How thoughtful of you, I replied with a tight smile, while alarm bells rang in my head. The aroma rising from the cup wasn't just off, it was wrong. It reminded me of the tea Nina served last month that sent me to urgent care. No one could explain what caused my symptoms. Nina had simply shrugged and claimed she'd brewed the tea exactly how she always did. Now, she sat across from me, stirring her own untouched cup. Her eyes never left mine. James has been quite the barista lately, she said with a smirk. He's been experimenting with new brewing methods, just for you. The way she emphasized "for you" sent a chill through me. I'd noticed how often James had been spending time at Nina's lately, always with vague explanations about planning a surprise for our anniversary. But the hushed conversations that stopped when I walked into the room, the texts I glimpsed on his phone, and now the strange-smelling coffee, it all painted a different picture. I picked up the cup and pretended to take a sip, watching them carefully over the rim. Their eyes flicked toward each other, a subtle glance, quick, but telling. I set the cup down. "Oh, would you look at that?" I said, grabbing my phone. "I need to take a quick work call. Nina, do you mind if I use your study?" "Of course," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Just try not to break anything." As I passed her seat, I stumbled, deliberately, catching myself on the edge of the table. In the process, I swiftly swapped our coffee cups. "I'm so sorry," I said breathlessly, straightening up. "I'm such a klutz." She waved it off with a tight smile. "Just be careful." I slipped into the study, leaving the door slightly ajar. My heart pounded as I watched from the shadows. Nina lifted the coffee, my coffee, to her lips and took a sip. My stomach twisted with guilt, but I didn't stop her. I needed the truth. After so many ER visits, allergic reactions, and unexplainable sicknesses, I couldn't keep doubting myself. It wasn't always like this. When I first met James at a wedding in Nashville, he was charming, attentive. Nina had welcomed me into the family, offered to help plan the wedding, but the warning signs were there even then. Stains mysteriously appearing on my dresses at key events, extra seasoning added to my meals when Nina helped cook. The symptoms began subtly: stomachaches, dizziness, fatigue. James always had a reason. "Maybe it was something you ate earlier. You're probably just stressed." But after I was hospitalized 2 months ago following breakfast at their home, after the doctors found something in my system they couldn't identify, I knew I had to stop making excuses for them. Nina took another sip. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the cup down. "James," she said quietly. Her face had gone pale. "Something's wrong." James looked up from his phone. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm in a heartbeat. He pushed back from the table so fast that his chair toppled over. "Nina, what's happening?" he asked, rushing to her side. Her hands were shaking now, violently. I don't feel." She tried to stand but collapsed against the table. "What did you put in that coffee?" she gasped, struggling for breath. That was my cue. I stepped out of the study, phone in hand, already recording. "That wasn't supposed to be your cup," James whispered to her. But the room had fallen so silent. His words carried easily. Nina's eyes widened in horror. "Call an ambulance," she croaked. "Please." "I can't." I dialed 911. "Yes, we need an ambulance at 1542 Maple Grove Drive," I said calmly, keeping my phone steady in one hand and the camera rolling in the other. Nina collapsed to the floor, convulsing, her body racked with tremors. James dropped to his knees beside her, panic seizing his face. But there was no fixing this, no excuse, no escaping what he had done. And now I had it all recorded. "My sister-in-law appears to be having a severe reaction to something in her coffee," I told the dispatcher. trying to keep my voice calm. She's conscious, but she's experiencing tremors. Nina's eyes locked onto mine across the room. The cold calculation that usually lingered in her gaze had vanished, replaced by raw, unmistakable fear. Christina, she gasped, her voice trembling. You switched them. You knew. Yes, ma'am. An ambulance is on its way, the dispatcher assured me. Please stay on the line. James was panicking. Nina, what's happening? That wasn't supposed to, it wasn't meant for. Shut up, James, Nina snapped through clenched teeth. Despite her visible pain, her fury flared. This is your fault. You said it would just make her too sick to attend the board meeting. You promised it couldn't be traced. My blood ran cold. The board meeting, my presentation for the new client account, the same one Nina had been gunning for at her own firm, the same one I'd worked on for months. And now, everything clicked into place. The tea last month, I said slowly, keeping my voice steady, and the breakfast 2 months ago. Those weren't accidents. Nina gritted her teeth as another wave of pain hit her. The tea was supposed to keep you home, so I could take the Johnson account, she admitted, but you still went. James said we just needed to discredit you, to make clients think you were unreliable. Sirens held outside. James stumbled back, his face pale, his perfect composure crumbling. Nina, stop talking, you don't know what you're saying. I do know, she spat, her words beginning to slur. We've been planning this for months. Ever since Christina started outperforming me in every client meeting, you were supposed to make sure she drank the damn coffee. Paramedics burst through the door. I stepped aside as they rushed in, still recording on my phone. As they worked to stabilize Nina and placed her on a stretcher, I sent the video to my private email, then to my lawyer. I'll ride with her, I told the paramedics. She needs proper treatment, and I need to make sure she gets it. As they wheeled Nina out, I met James's stunned gaze. I'm sure the doctors will be very interested to know exactly what was in that coffee. The ER at Nashville General was a storm of movement and murmurs. I sat quietly in the waiting room, replaying the video on my phone, Nina's confession, the tremor in her voice, the unraveling of their plan. It wasn't paranoia. A nurse appeared. Family of Nina Anderson? I stood. I'm her sister-in-law. She led me past the double doors. She's stable, but the lab found some concerning toxins in her system. The doctor wants to speak with you. Outside Nina's room, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes greeted me. Mrs. Bennett, I'm Dr. Phillips. Can you tell me what happened before your sister-in-law became ill? I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and said, I think you should hear this first. I played the recording. As the doctor listened, her expression changed from concern to alarm. This is very serious, she said quietly, tapping notes into her tablet. The substance in her system doesn't belong anywhere near food or drink. This was no accident. Just then, James appeared at the end of the hallway, his face pale and sweaty. He must have overheard. Christina, wait, let me explain. Stay back, Dr. Phillips warned, hitting the nurse's call button. Security to room 412, please. James raised his hands. This is a misunderstanding. Nina didn't know what she was saying. Really? I pulled up another screen on my phone. So these texts, about making sure she's out of commission before the Henderson pitch, are just friendly banter? His face turned ghostly. You went through my phone? After I found the vial in your desk drawer? Yes. Dr. Phillips's eyes narrowed. We'll need to compare your blood work with hers. If you've been experiencing similar symptoms, this may have gone on longer than we thought. 2 security guards approached, flanking James. You don't understand, he stammered. Nina and we were trying to help you. You were pushing too hard, working nonstop. We just thought if you took a step back. By poisoning me? My voice didn't waver, even as my hands trembled. How long has this been going on? Since Christmas? Was that you too? James said nothing. Behind him, I could see Nina through the glass. No more smirks, no more games, just fear. Detective Mendoza is on her way, Dr. Phillips said. She'll need to take statements from everyone involved. Detective Mendoza arrived within the hour, composed, focused, with the air of someone who'd seen the worst and still kept her edge. She listened carefully as I played the recording and showed her the forwarded texts. Mrs. Bennett, she said, flipping through her notes, you mentioned multiple prior hospitalizations. Can you tell me more about those? I nodded. It was time to tell the whole truth. And this time, they'd be forced to listen. I pulled out my phone again, opening a document I'd been meticulously maintaining for months. The first incident was in February. After a dinner at Nina's house, I'd suffered severe stomach pains and dizziness. The second came in April, during the tea incident. Then in June, after breakfast with them, the symptoms returned. My voice stayed steady as I explained. Each time the symptoms were similar, but just different enough that the doctors couldn't pinpoint a cause. Detective Mendoza's eyes narrowed as she scanned my detailed log of dates, symptoms, and circumstances. And you've been keeping records all this time? I noticed the pattern, I admitted, hesitating before pulling another phone from my purse, a backup I kept with a different number. I used it to record conversations when I was around them. I have several recordings, I said, where Nina and James discuss their plans. They're careful not to be explicit, but the intent is clear. I played one clip. Nina's voice came through clearly. The Henderson account is worth millions. James, we can't let her ruin everything we've worked for. Just stick to the plan. A few days of illness should be enough. James's voice followed, equally damning. I've got something stronger this time. She won't make it to the presentation. Detective Mendoza's expression hardened as she listened. Through the window of Nina's room, I could see my sister-in-law, awake but looking far less confident than she had at brunch. The hospital is running toxicology screens, the detective said. Dr. Phillips has already identified several substances that don't occur naturally. We'll need samples from your home as well. Suddenly, a commotion down the hall pulled our attention. James was arguing with the security guards, his voice rising in desperation. I need to speak with my wife, he shouted. Christina, please, you don't understand. We were trying to protect you, James pleaded. Detective Mendoza stepped between us. Mr. Bennett, you're not helping your case. We've already found evidence of premeditation. James laughed, a hollow, bitter sound echoing through the corridor. We were just trying to slow her down. She was working herself to death, taking all the major accounts, Nina said through the hospital window, her voice shaking. If we could make her take some time off by poisoning her. That's not protection, Mr. Bennett. Mendoza's voice cut sharply through him. That's attempted murder. James's face drained of color. Murder? No, that's not. We never meant to. Then what exactly did you mean to do? I asked, my voice calm despite the rage building inside. When you put something in my coffee this morning, what were you trying to accomplish? James fell silent. Behind him, I saw Nina watching through her hospital window, her face a mask of fear and cold calculation. Was she trying to figure out how to spin this? How to explain months of poisoning as some misguided attempt to help? We'll need both of their phones, Detective Mendoza told the security guards, and I want officers posted at both doors. Nobody leaves until we get the toxicology results. Dr. Phillips entered Nina's room, tablet in hand, her expression grim as she reviewed the test results. Detective Mendoza and I followed while James remained outside, flanked by guards. Nina tried to sit up straighter in her hospital bed, but the tremors hadn't fully subsided. The toxicology report shows elevated levels of several substances, Dr. Phillips said clinically. Most concerning is the presence of a compound typically used in pharmaceutical testing. It's not something the general public should have access to. Nina's face paled. That's impossible, James muttered. It was just something to cause mild symptoms. Mild symptoms? Detective Mendoza interrupted, pulling out her notebook. Like the ones your sister-in-law experienced over the past 6 months. The door opened, and another detective entered, holding an evidence bag. We found these in Mr. Bennett's desk at the Anderson marketing firm, the detective announced, presenting several small bottles labeled with clinical details, dosages, reactions meticulously recorded. My knees weakened as the full scope of their plan hit me. You were documenting everything like some kind of experiment, I said. It wasn't like that, Nina protested, her voice wavering. We just needed to track what worked. The first few attempts weren't strong enough. You kept showing up to meetings anyway, so the dosages increased. Detective Mendoza examined the bottles. Did you know these substances could be lethal in higher concentrations? The room fell silent. James, still visible through the window, sank into a chair in the hallway, burying his face in his hands. I looked at Nina, then back at James. The Henderson account, I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. It wasn't just about the presentation, was it? You needed me out of the way permanently. The client specifically requested me as their lead. Nina's face twisted with a mixture of anger and fear. You were ruining everything I built. That client portfolio took years to build, and then you showed up, and suddenly everyone wanted to work with you instead. James didn't respond. He said he could fix it by killing me. The words hung heavy in the air, sharp with accusation. We weren't trying to, Nina started, but Dr. Phillips cut her off. The concentration found in the coffee you drank today, the doctor said, fixing Nina with a steely gaze, was significantly higher than any previous samples from Mrs. Bennett's earlier hospital visits. If she had consumed that dose fully, the outcome would have been severe, possibly fatal. Detective Mendoza turned to the other officer. We'll need full warrants for both their homes and offices. Also, contact the pharmaceutical company listed on these bottles, find out how they obtained these substances. Nina slumped back against her pillows, the fight draining from her face. It wasn't supposed to go this far, she whispered. James kept saying, just one more try. I stepped closer to her bed, voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. Every time I got sick, every meeting I missed, every client I lost, you were both there, watching, taking notes on how your poison affected me. What kind of people does that make you? The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, I could hear James being read his rights as more officers arrived. Nina stared down at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. Detective, I said, turning away from my sister-in-law, I'm ready to make my formal statement. The trial lasted 3 weeks but felt like years. Each day, I sat in the courtroom, watching the prosecution methodically lay out the case against James and Nina. The evidence was overwhelming: bottles found in James's office, detailed notes on every poisoning attempt, recorded conversations, and text messages revealing their calculated plans. What struck me most was their demeanor. Nina, usually so polished and confident, looked small and defeated in the defendant's chair. James couldn't even meet my eyes, his gaze fixed on the floor as expert witnesses described the potentially lethal effects of the substances they used. Dr. Phillips's testimony was particularly damning. She presented a thorough analysis showing how the dosages had gradually increased over time, demonstrating clear intent to cause serious harm. A representative from the pharmaceutical company confirmed that James had stolen the compounds through a college friend who worked in their research department. The prosecutor's closing statement hammered home the point: this wasn't just corporate sabotage, it was a systematic attempt to harm me, a family member, with a calculated escalation that could have resulted in death. When the verdict was finally read, I felt no joy, only relief. James and Nina were found guilty on multiple counts, including attempted murder and conspiracy. The judge's words echoed through the silent courtroom: the premeditated nature of these actions, carried out against a family member over an extended period, demands the maximum sentence. I watched as they were led away in handcuffs, thinking about how greed and jealousy had twisted two people I once trusted into something unrecognizable, their business, reputations, and freedom all sacrificed in an attempt to destroy me. 1 year after the trial, I stood at the podium of the Nashville Business Leaders Conference, preparing to give the keynote speech. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was exactly the kind of opportunity Nina had tried to prevent me from achieving. The Henderson account, the one she and James had desperately wanted, had led to several more major clients, establishing me as one of the top marketing executives in the region. Success isn't just about talent or hard work, I began, looking out at the sea of faces. It's about integrity, about building genuine relationships based on trust. I paused, letting my words sink in. Sometimes, the biggest threats to our success come from those closest to us, but surviving those challenges makes us stronger. After the speech, several young professionals approached me seeking advice. One woman, her eyes bright with determination, asked how I'd maintained my composure throughout the ordeal. I told her, I focused on what I could control, I gathered evidence, trusted my instincts, and refused to let fear stop me from pursuing my goals. Later that evening, I received an email from the Henderson client confirming they were renewing their contract for another 3 years. I smiled, thinking about how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't trusted my instincts that day at brunch. That morning, The local paper ran a small article about Nina and James beginning their prison sentences. I didn't read it. Instead, I focused on the proposal for my newest client project. Knowing the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about moving forward and succeeding despite those who try to hold you back.